like to Okay, we would like to thank all the organizers, in particular, for this hybrid workshop and for giving us the opportunity to present our work and research. So the idea for this communication was born from our long collaboration and friendship when we worked together in the Oasis. 10 years later, in different working environments and with different collaborators, we are studying the two Egyptian deserts. We therefore decided to study the trade network patterns from late Roman to Byzantine and early Islamic periods on both sides of the Nile Valley.
So indeed, in the scientific literature, the Egyptian deserts have often been described in contrast with one another, one compared to a scatter of islands and the other as an hostile space that must be crossed to reach the Red Sea. Yet, they are comparable space governed by parallel economies and have hosted similar population and communities. In the first part of this topic, we will discuss the geographical and political situation of the two deserts. Then we will analyze the trade network and some case studies in order to outline the thermic profile and the distribution patterns on each side of the Nile Valley.
So a chain of oases parallel to the Nile Valley dots the sequence of Egyptian Western Desert Plateau. They had a long occupational history that starting during the Old Kingdom and reached a peak of importance and prosperity in the middle of the late Roman period, after which all of them declined sharply. Incorporated into the Augustan Provincia Egypti from the earliest year of its founding, the oases were the westernmost districts under the Egyptian province jurisdiction. So administratively, they were divided under the Romans into three parts. So the Ammoniacae, that is the Siwa, the small oasis Bahria and Farafra, and the great oasis Karga and Dakhla. By being a focus of interest and investment of dominant powers, the oases functioned as the hubs of a dense network of routes which extended through the Western Desert between the Byzantine and the early Islamic periods. An intricate network of desert tracks linked the Mediterranean coast to the Qattara Depression where Siwa is located. So the oasis is, let's say, a world apart for much of its history. It was more closely to Libya than to Egypt. Across the Marmarica Plateau, indeed, the journeys were made possible by the presence of water, so cisterns, along the way and buildings that gave shelters to human and animals. The two major roads that connected the Marmarica Plateau to Siwa were from the harbors of Solum and Marchand. Additionally, there were the roads from Siwa to the small oasis, more precisely to Bahria through the Darb al-Bahria, and the desert tracks connected Siwa to the Arsinoite Nome. Alongside this road, there were connections also between Siwa and Cyrenaica and Siwa and Libyan oasis, which remained active until at least the early medieval times. There were also several tracks northwards and eastwards from the small oasis, linking Bahria with the main center of the Arsinoite, that are mainly Socnopaionesos, Kars Karun, and Medinet al-Fayoum, or the ancient Arsinoe, contacts that increased in frequency during the Roman rule. And Bahria Oxyrhynchos was the other one that remained active until the 10th century CE. The small oasis had also contact with the African region. And we have to consider that, for example, there is also the other part of the small oasis that is Farafra, that is considered part of the small oasis, but is still difficult to understand in which moment it was real active, because there are no reference into the documents of this part of the small oasis. This is a geographical position. It has a geographical position which made it one of the extreme western posts of Egypt, and was a natural junction along the trans-Saharan caravans route, but also was exposed from Libyan people. And of course, it was the link between Bahria and Dakhla. The small oasis indeed was connected to Dakhla, or to the Great Oasis, the next slide, by Darb al-Farafra, and Dakhla itself was connected to the valley by the Darb al-Tawil. So the part of the Greek oasis nearest to the valley was Karga, that was linked to it by several roads. Mainly there was the north connection to Karga Lycopolis, Asyut. The most important of this connection was Lycopolis Asyut, but there was also another road that connected Karga to Panopoli, Nome. And because Karga is so long in terms of space north-south, there were also routes connecting the southern part of the oasis near Dush to several valley cities, ranging from Hermontis to Apollonopolis Magna. But it was likely that most of the traffic between Dakhla and Karga went to Dakhla went by Karga. So this is because there were more sources of food and water, and there were the possibility to reach from and to the two oases by two main routes, were the Darb al-Gurbari and Darb Ainamur. The next. In general, Dakhla and Karga share a common economic system and many characteristics in their textual and material output. So from 48 CE to the third quarter of the 4th century CE, Karga and Dakhla appear to be a single administrative unit. The three polis, Hibis in Karga and Motis, and from the 304 CE, Trimitis in Dakhla, constitute the hub of extension network of connection. Next. In the 4th, 5th century, Egypt experienced momentous changes in its religious and cultural environment fostered by Christianity. So this gradual phenomenon is well attested in the Western Desert, where archaeological evidence are more abundant and better preserved elsewhere in the country. In particular, Dakhla and Karga offer the widest range of archaeological remains of churches, while we have very few monasteries and hermitage.
The eastern desert of Egypt extends over a vast area of mountain and sandy plains between the Nile and the Red Sea. Its natural resources, gold, gems, and high-quality stones such as granite, porphyry, greyvac, and soft stones, have been exploited since the pre-dynastic period, despite the difficulties due to harsh climatic conditions and geographical and geological environment. The desert is also a passageway for all sorts of traffics coming from countries bordering the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. Expeditions and commercial activities began in the Old Kingdom and greatly expanded during the Ptolemaic and Roman periods for trade of spices, initially fragrant resins and germs, and a wide range of exotic products, including pearls and fabrics. This trade lasted until the early Islamic period. It explains the developments of harbors in the Red Sea, such as Haidab. After the Ptolemaic occupation of the region, the Romans settled in fortresses along the desert, the Praesidia, designed to safely guard the roads that crossed the region from the Nile Valley to the port of Myos Hormos and then Berenike. Many of these early Roman forts have been excavated and studied, as have the forts that guarded the roads leading to the quarries of the Mons Porphyrites and the Mons Claudianus. The 3rd century saw barbarians' rebellions that were severely repressed by the Roman Empire. Trade suffered greatly and many sites were abandoned. During the late Roman and Byzantine period, so starting from the 4th century, the Eastern Desert occupation changed. The Roman army, previously well established, leaves it, only keeping fortresses in Abu Shah, newly built on the Red Sea, and along the Porphyrites road, whose exploitation lasts until the 5th century. New incomers settled down in the northern part of the desert, monks and hermits as early as the 4th century. Probably one of the first churches in Egypt was founded in Nakat, southwest of the Porphyrites. The hermitage there were occupied from the beginning of the 5th to the 6th century, when the religious men probably moved north near Clisma for security reasons. Finally, the whole region was occupied for a long period by gold workers, as in the case of the gold mines of Birum Fawahir, mostly during the 5th and the 6th century. This probably artificially creates a kind of a brief reoccupation of some of the forts on the road between Coptos and the mines. During the early Islamic period, gold mining mutated. The well-organized camp of Birum Fawahir gave way to makeshift camps for short expeditions of miners sent to quarry the fresh gold for the Abbasid Empire, which needed metal to mint its coins. These seasonal camps, mostly dating from the 9th to the 11th century, are scattered through the desert close to the old gold mines. It is mainly from this Abbasid period that the Red Sea forts flourished. They participated to the trade in spices and black slaves from the Bilad al-Sudan and beyond. They also provided the logistic for the pilgrims who sailed from the Egypt coast to Jeddah, the port of Mecca. At that time, Haidab flourished and was connected to Aswan by several caravans driven by Beja people. This general presentation made, let us now focus on the similarities and the differences on the trade patterns on both sides of the Red Sea. The ceramic evidence is, for this study, a way to evaluate the collections and links.
So since the Roman period, the oases of the Libyan desert have experienced significantly prosperity and prolific activity. However, the two oases play different roles as a part of the Roman imperial system. The strategic position of the Greek oasis necessitated good defenses, not only for security, but also for control of important water sources and trade routes. So Karga was the control and strategic pole, hosting frontier post designed to control the valley toward Farafra and north-south between the valley and Sudan. Next, Dakhla represented the political and the residential pole, where the landowners had their large estate and administrated most of the production of the Greek oasis. Much less military presence was attested in Dakhla. Certainly, the good management of water resources and the use of high-performance hydraulic system like aqueducts, canals, Sakia system, and maintenance contributed to the expansion of cultivable areas and therefore a wider range of crops, as well as the good exploitation of the natural resources, mainly alum, natron, ochre, and lapis lazuli. A further consequence is the increase of ceramic atelier. Vessels indeed were requested for preparing food, restocking provisions, and mostly for agricultural and commercial needs of the oasis, as well as for trading products with the rest of the country.
The resumption of the porphyry exploitation during the late 4th, early 5th century led to the military presence on the road to ensure the transport of the luxurious stone. This has been confirmed by recent French excavation in Der El Atrash, as well as by the late Lycabettus period, which has been studied by an English team. One of the characteristics of Egyptian Christianity is the establishment of monastic settlement far from the inhabited areas in the dry and silent depth of the desert. For this purpose, they settled in the desert of Egypt, especially in the eastern desert, which was soon inhabited by monks and hermits. According to Abba Apollo, in the Historia Monacorum in Egypt, there were as many monks in the desert as there were in the rest of the world. And the place soon became very busy and popular. We can thus observe an important Christian occupation within the Eastern Desert. Monasteries such as St. Paul and St. Anthony, hermits found also refuge in Nakat, source of the Porphyrites, as surveyed by a Slovenian team. The destruction of pagan structure further south in the desert is attributed to traveling or itinerant monks in the 4th and 5th centuries. As I told you earlier, between the 9th and the 11th century, miners occupied and worked in the Eastern Desert to exploit the gold-bearing quartz. To do this, a small expedition was sent out to continue or sometimes initiate work in quartz-bearing region. In the vicinity of Der El Atrash, west of Porphyrites, more than 6 villages were surveyed, consisting of about 24 huts, a few stone tools to operate the quartz. The pottery is limited to a dozen individuals per camp. Statistical analysis on the fabrics show that more than half of it comes from Aswan. Given that the Wadi Alaki opens to the south of Aswan and that it is the Wadi or the site that provided most of the gold for the period, I suggest that the teams of workers were trained there in Aswan and came from there with their Aswan cooking pots, wine amphorae and bowls to Atrash to dig. The statistics of the origins of fabrics were not that obvious when I was studied the Samut region further south. It only represented more than 1/3 of the assemblage.
Going to the ceramic evidence, so from the Ptolemaic through the early Byzantine period, the potters of the Greek oasis show a very prolific activity, locally producing tableware, cookingware, utility vessels, storage and transport containers. On the other hand, there is so far no evidence of amphora production. Focusing on the late 4th century context, it is evident that Dakhla and Karga share the same assemblages while maintaining a certain individuality in the fabrics used for the production of the ceramics. So in general, during the Roman time, they show similarities with the typical form spread in the Nile Valley and the Delta up to the late Roman fine ceramic wares, especially those imitating the production in North Africa terra sigillata that increased during the 4th and 5th century. Transport containers, distinctive of the Western Desert oasis production and tradition, let's say, are the barrel-shaped keg or siga. These containers were produced in large quantities since the 3rd intermediate period down to the present. Indeed, except in Bahria, where the production of amphora is attesting imitating the African amphora during the 4th and the 5th century, there is no evidence of amphora in the Western Desert, produced in the Western Desert. So kegs were used not only to tap and hold water, churning milk, making and containing butter and cheese, but there are some examples with black resin inside. So they were used to trade wine. And this wine produced from the oasis was stored in jars, as you can see on the right, sealed with mud stoppers. We have found like 100 in one building in Almeida, with this small ostraca on top embedded in the mud stopper, on which is mentioned the name and the farm where the wine was produced. And of course, carried in the kegs that were more easily to be attached to the side or camel of donkeys. During the Roman and Byzantine period, the evidence from imports from Egypt, but also from Mediterranean and Nubia in the Great Oasis, are only a small part of the ceramic repertories everywhere in the two Karga and Dakhla. Indeed, while the amphorae produced in the Nile Valley testify to a regular caravan trade with the Great Oasis, they represent a very weak evidence so far, but this could be probably reevaluated with the targeted and systematic excavation and investigation. As you can see on the right, for example, I told you that the two routes used were Darb el-Gubari and Darb al-Namur. So in 1936, Willock reports that on the Darb el-Gubari, there was the presence of many late Roman 7 from Karga to Dakhla. In 2023, I made a survey in the on the Darb al-Namur, and especially in the mining area probably used to extract the alumina. I found this place that is 2 kilometers southwest of from El Dabadib, with this building made in stone, where there was like a carpet on the sand made of late Roman 7 and late Roman 1. So it is quite, and this site is just in the starting point from Karga to Dakhla on the Darb al-Namur. So it is quite reasonable to hypothesize that these amphorae arrived at El Dabadib full of wine from the valley, were refilled with drinking water from the aqueducts, and sent probably to the site of the workmen. So apparently the greatest part of late Roman 7 and late Roman 1 stopped in this way station from Karga, and only some example maybe were transported by the caravan full of wine in Dakhla. I hope to have the opportunity to make a classification of this material next year. So in detail, Dakhla and Karga have imports of different origins. Karga settlement show a quite relevant, it's open to the east, so it show a quite relevant presence of Roman Egyptian amphorae from the valley. And only in the south of Karga, the southern part of Karga, we have imports from Aswan and some example of late Roman III that are not present in the northern part of Karga. In the next slide, in Dakhla, on the contrary, we have much more imports, so of different variety from the Mediterranean. So this means that probably Dakhla was open to the north from the other oases. So the material came from there. And we have late Roman 7, late Roman 4, late Roman 5, 6 from Abu Mina, but also imports from Cilicia, from south of Italy, south of Spain, and France, and some example, especially in Kellis, and some specimens in Almeida from North Africa.
Considering that the inhabitants of the Eastern Desert all stayed there temporarily, and that the population were male, military, workmen, churchmen, it's not surprising that the Eastern Desert was not a place where ceramics were produced. Consequently, all the material found there was imported from the valley or from outside of Egypt. Material coming from Nakat hermitages, the Lycabettus village of quarrymen in the Porphyrites, and Der El Atrash fort show very strong similarities, suggesting the same supply system. People used to drink a quantity of wine transported in late Roman 7 amphorae, along with a cup of early Amphore Egyptian 3T, and a few amphorae from Aswan. Also containing wine, a few bottles of the western oasis, called Harga bottles, have been identified, and a few kegs. Imports were also found, a couple of late Roman 4 amphorae coming from Gaza region, a Palestinian back-shaped late Roman 5, a few late Roman 1 from Cilicia and Cyprus, and late Roman 3 from the Meander Valley. They all transported wine, praised by many ancient sources as early as the 4th century. The tableware mainly consists of Group K coming from the Nile Valley and fine Group O from Aswan. So far, no African red slipware has been found. The cooking wares come from the nearby Middle Nile Valley. Liquid containers are one-handled juglets similar to those of the Great Oasis. The situation is quite different from the 9th century gold force material. The assemblage there is almost entirely made of Aswan ware, cooking pots, tableware, and amphorae. The Nile fabric vessels consist of some coarse jars, juglets, and a few back-shaped amphorae. The link with Aswan is here direct, although one could not speak of a real network. Material came with the man, it is not supplied on purpose.
So to conclude, the choice of the route is dependent upon the path available, that is sand or water, the mode of transportation, that is donkey, camel, and boats, the transported goods, solid or liquid, the career resources, of course, the food and money, but of course, the environment. So the presence of water when you travel in the desert is very important. All these factors allow us to answer to the initial questions as follows. So do the distribution network mirror each other? We can say no, because they do not mirror each other, because the two deserts were inhabited by different communities, workmen, religious men, civils, different degree of militarization, and also different organization of this Roman army and distribution of the force along the water sources. The second question was, how did they evolve during the longue durée? Starting from the 4th to 5th century, both territories are controlled by nomadic groups. So in the east, nomads take control back after the demilitarization and through agreements with the political power governing the country. The marginalization on the other side, the marginalization of the oasis, gave the advantage to the Saharan nomadic groups. So from the 1st century onwards, the oases were isolated, and the Christian settlements remained active and strongly attached to the valley in the north, in the Fayoum. So the settlement in the north of the desert, which were initially linked to the valley, because they had the inherited roads used by the Roman army, became isolated from for a time before moving closer to the Red Sea and Suez, which from the 6th century onwards became a strategic center of power and economy. The third question, how the ceramic product found on both sides comparable with the Nile Valley? Yes, of course, they are, even if they are locally produced, traditionally they take the shape from the Nile Valley, but in different fabrics. This is quite clear. Especially in the desert, Western desert, we have kegs and yellow bottles, while these vessels circulated fairly regularly, even outside Egypt, or Egyptian oasis, for long journeys, as attested in the Eastern Desert, at sea through the Nile Valley and the Delta. The third question, how do these remote regions fit into the great Mediterranean trade networks? So the Western Desert, for the Western Desert, only some of these oases were involved directly, and this is the case of Siwa because it's closer to the Mediterranean coast, while in the others there are remnants of imported products arriving from the other oases. In the Eastern Desert, it was directly connected to the Mediterranean trade to supply the soldiers with good imported wine. During the Byzantine period, the strategic importance of the Red Sea translated the international network there. So consequently, some new products appear in the Eastern Desert, coming via Suez from the Levant. What are the starting points? So the strategic areas like the Mediterranean coast, main harbors, through the river, Nile Valley, and then spread in the different land axes of connections. So trade networks are now better understood than in antiquity, both in the Eastern and Western deserts. However, these studies are much less advanced for medieval times. The steps of the pilgrimage route between Aswan and Haidab, for instance, are well known, but archaeology remains silent. In the Western Desert, on the contrary, few medieval sites are known, despite the fact that many important roads were crossing it. The Darb el-Arba'in, for example, is yet to be analyzed by our discipline. The early Arab and Muslim Arabic geographers' account, 8th centuries, on the Egyptian oasis report a dense network of trans-Saharan routes that connected Egypt with Ghana and the land of blacks, so sub-Saharan Africa, by passing through the oasis. But many things need to be done, still done. So I think, yeah. We finish it. Thank you.
Thank you.